The Blackbeard pirates need some way to get to Laugh-Tale, and to this point in the story, they have not mentioned reading the Poneglyphs even once. This is a stark difference from other top tiers such as Roger and Big Mom who actively sought out a way to read them, or Luffy who luckily had one fall right into his lap. I believe that this is because Blackbeard himself has had that part figured out from the very beginning, and because of that, I think I even know where he was headed after chapter 956. But before we get into it, please head down to the like button and help your boy out with the algorithm. It's been a little funky lately, so every like can go a long way to help out the channel. But on to the theory.
Yeah.
The first things we need to tackle are whether Blackbeard even wants to go to Laugh-Tale, and if he does he just have a plan to get there without reading the Poneglyphs somehow? And as for the first part, Blackbeard undoubtedly wants to go to Laugh-Tale, and I actually think we will get all 4 Yonko there at some point, and that's going to be the topic of my next video. The story has basically been setting up Luffy and Blackbeard as parallels from the start, and it would be very surprising to not have them duke it out for the right to become the Pirate King. But the real reason that we know Blackbeard is going to Laugh-Tale is because he is a fan of researching history. We know this because of SBS 82, where Oda told us that Teach's 2 hobbies were gambling and historical research. He will definitely want to research the most important history there is, which is only on Laugh-Tale, and maybe Odin's logbook, but I really hope not. But what if he can just get there without reading the Poneglyphs, making reading them unnecessary? And to that, I would say that that's possible. He may not want to go through the trouble of getting the Road Poneglyphs, or I guess it's Load now, and he will take the shortcut. Blackbeard could simply just follow someone, or maybe he steals all the rubbings from someone like Kid or Law. I also wouldn't rule out the possibility that Blackbeard has an eternal pose, but he's just been waiting for the right time to make it to Laugh-Tale for some reason, possibly tied to the ancient weapons, or maybe something he's read on a prior Poneglyph. But there is so much important information written on the other Poneglyphs, including other pieces of history, and even the location of Pluton, which we will discuss later. Pluton's a mole, by the way. And for all we know, the information at Laugh-Tale is written in the Poneglyph language, meaning that Blackbeard would need to read it to understand the history anyway. So due to all of this, I think it's possible that Blackbeard skips the Road Poneglyph step because of the difficulty, but it certainly doesn't mean that he can't read them or just doesn't want to at all. So what convinces me that Blackbeard himself is the one who can read the Poneglyphs and not one of his crew members? Or why can't he just focus on stealing Robin or Pudding after he has all of the rubbings? And this goes back to his 2 hobbies, gambling and historical research. And I think we have seen one hobby be very prevalent, being the gambling, but the other one has been avoided for the most part. His gambling side shone through during Impel Down in Marineford due to his meticulous planning and his smart bets that ultimately got him Whitebeard's fruit and a slew of level 6 prisoners on his crew. Much like any smart and cunning gambler would do, he does everything he can to increase his odds and make his own luck, such as going after an easy target in Luffy to hand over to the Marines so that he could become a warlord in the first place. Obviously he ended up fighting Ace, but his plan was to actually fight Luffy because it would be an easier option, but Ace just got in the way. He then parlayed that warlord position into getting easy access into Impel Down so that he could then free the level 6 prisoners, and then he waited till Whitebeard was on his literal last legs to attack and try to steal his fruit. And I think it's fair to call all of this a gamble. The man and his whole crew should have died if not for Shiryu coming in with the antidote, but the point is that we saw his gambling mindset be used to his advantage by giving him the best chance to succeed and ultimately doing so at Marineford. And any good gambler is going to know when to take his chances, such as in chapter 956 when he said he would go after something if the Marines weren't going to. And we will discuss that later on as well. And while we have seen plenty of his gambling hobby shine through, we have seen very little about his love for historical research. A few smaller things are that he spent a lot of time studying devil fruits and even memorized what the dark fruit looked like, and he even knew he could get a second one somehow. And he also boarded Whitebeard's ship because he believed it would be his best chance of getting the fruit, so he must have researched something that made him believe Whitebeard was the right choice. But it feels to me like there has to be a lot more here. This is hardly history compared to what is on the Poneglyphs, so I think Oda is hiding something something big, and this connects back to something else that Oda told us. He said that if Teach were not a pirate, he would be an archaeologist. And what does the archaeologist of the Straw Hats do for the crew? I mean, you already know the answer to that. I think this factor also backs up the idea that he absolutely is interested in finding out more of the true history, because if his hobby is historical research and he'd be an archaeologist in real life, I think that's just pretty clear evidence that he wants to find out the truth, and maybe he has even developed his own way to read the language himself. Some of you may be thinking that it's just highly unlikely that yet another person can read the Poneglyphs, but it really shouldn't be hard to believe at this point. I mean, we were originally told that Robin was the only person who could read the Poneglyphs, and that was why her bounty was so high even as an 8-year-old, but that was 22 years ago now, meaning we know at least 2 other people who were alive at that time that could read them, being Oden and Sukiyaki. Plus, Robin's dad should still be alive, and I wouldn't be shocked if Yamato learned the language from Sukiyaki while she spent time in Wano to become Oden or whatever she's doing. So there are a lot of people that can read them compared to what we were told in the first place. So it shouldn't be that surprising that Blackbeard may have found a way to read them as well. But the question is, how can he read the Poneglyphs on his own? And I think this is the hardest part for sure. I mean, how did he learn the language? Or does he use the voice of all things like Roger, but maybe it's on a whole new level? Or are some of those theories about Blackbeard being multiple people true? And this reminds me of a theory that I heard from Threevil, which I'll go ahead and link down below, and it includes the idea that Blackbeard could be based off a Hindu legend named Trisiras. Now, maybe I'm butchering that pronunciation, but I'm just going to roll with it. Now, many of you may already be familiar with Hanuman because of the theories surrounding him and Luffy and potentially Sun Wukong, so I won't get into that because there's already plenty of those theories out there. But as for why this matters for Blackbeard, the important thing to know is that Hanuman literally beheads Trisiras in a massive war. That kind of sets up a parallel right away with Luffy and Blackbeard, because we know that they will for sure duke it out at some point with everything on the line, and Luffy will eventually win. Trisiras was created to dethrone Indra, who is essentially the king of the gods. But what is really interesting about Trisiras is not only was he created, but he also has 3 heads that all have very important functions. One is for drinking, one is for observing his surroundings, and one is for literally reading the ancient text of the Vedas in Hinduism. And wouldn't you know it, there are 4 Vedas, almost exactly like the 4 road poneglyphs in One Piece. And what's also interesting is that while we have yet to see this side of Blackbeard, I definitely think we have seen the other 2. The drinking side is the first one we met back in Jaya, where we saw him drinking and eating apple pie next to Luffy, and then the side that observes his surroundings is probably the one that we see the most, especially when it comes to the way he plans things ahead and takes advantage of situations. And actually throughout the story, we have seen various formations of Blackbeard's teeth in different situations, which also add credence to this theory. Now, normally I'm not a big fan of tying so directly into folklore because Oda can twist things a million different ways and it's just so hard to predict what he's going to draw on. But we have had so many soft references to Sun Wukong and Hanuman throughout the story, and now Bajrang Gun is a very concrete canon tie between Luffy and Sun Wukong, so I am starting to feel safer drawing on some of these parallels, especially Trisidas, which fits Blackbeard so well. While Trisidas had 3 heads that had different functions, I think Blackbeard could have even more than that, and obviously he has something going on other than just 3 different heads because he only has 1. We have heard before about Teach's body being different, and he also doesn't sleep. Perhaps the 3 or more personalities within him take shifts which allow him to avoid sleeping. But how could this even be possible? Well, we know in Thriller Bark that putting someone's shadow in a corpse would result in a being that kept some of the shadow's memories and abilities, so perhaps this can start to explain it. And he also has very direct ties to darkness, even saying that the fruit chose him specifically, so I think there's something here. Maybe souls are also tied into it somehow, like a soul was given shadows or vice versa. I might leave this to a whole other video though, because there's just so much to discuss here. But despite everything that I've said so far, we still haven't seen Blackbeard show any interest in the poneglyphs. And if he can read them, and he does plan to do so eventually, when is he finally going to? And I think he already has. And he told us he was going to back in chapter 956. In that chapter, chapter, Blackbeard claimed that if the Marines aren't going to take it, then I will. And he said this after looking at the major events from the Reverie that were in the paper. And we now know that those events included Cobra dying and Vivi disappearing, among other things. And I think knowing what was in the paper makes it a lot easier to consider what Blackbeard was thinking. And unless there was more in the paper than we know now, I think Blackbeard has to be going to Alabasta. They are completely devoid of leadership right now, save for Koza, and it's one of the 20 original kingdoms, so it obviously has some type of history written somewhere. Blackbeard is very in the know, and he probably either thinks Pluton is there like Crocodile did, or he knows that the Pluton Poneglyph is there. So when he sees that there is no leadership in Alabasta, he likely also assumes that there will be anarchy and that it's anyone's game to take over. But if the Marines are focused on everything else going on, then what's stopping Blackbeard from waltzing right in and getting the Poneglyph? I mean, he is a master schemer, and he has shown time and time again that he will jump at easy opportunities when they arise. He doesn't like putting a target on his back more than he has to, so if he were to take Alabasta normally and force the government and even the Straw Hats to intervene, that would just never be worth it. But now, he can go in with very little resistance, and people may not even know that he was ever there. And to add to this even further, we just saw how upset Dragon was about Cobra's death in chapter 1058, saying that he won't forgive SABO no matter the reason. This indicates that Dragon must like Cobra and probably even believes him to be an ally of some sort for the Revolutionary Army. I assume that this is because he's a good man and runs his country the right way, as Dragon presumably wants all kings to do, and Alabasta is one of the 20 kingdoms, meaning that Alabasta holds extremely important information that Dragon doesn't want other people to know, particularly the world government or other strong pirates that can challenge him. But now that Cobra is gone, there's a power vacuum, and Dragon likely knows that not only is his friend dead, but their country is in danger and that important information could now leak out into the world. And something we have to remember is that Blackbeard took over Baltigo. And while I'm sure Dragon and the Revolutionary Army tried to destroy or just take a lot of the information before Blackbeard took control, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Blackbeard to have learned about Alabasta's importance from whatever was left behind. Plus, we are getting late into the story and we have yet to see anything come of that situation. If Blackbeard referenced some specific something to go get before the government, wouldn't it make sense to be something he learned about from Baltigo? And if we now know that Dragon has a strong connection with Cobra, meaning that Dragon may have potentially known about the Pluton Poneglyph, then Blackbeard may have that information now, so he left to go take it right when he saw an opening. And this also matches up with the fact that the world government is also maybe going for it, because the world government probably knows that Alabasta has some kind of important information, since they are one of the original 20 kingdoms. But they couldn't just go in over the last 800 years because they are allied with them, and that would look pretty bad on the world government's part if they just went in and took over the country even though one of their kings is still there. But that's not all. The Poneglyph will obviously tell him that Pluton is in Wano, so he will likely tell his crew that they need to hurry up and turn back, because we know Beehive Island is very close to Wano thanks to a recent One Piece world map, meaning that Alabasta is almost on the opposite side of the world from both Beehive Island, which is Blackbeard's base, and Wano, which is where they need to go. And this also helps legitimize the timeline for all of these things, since it has been a couple weeks in One Piece time since chapter 956. However, I also have a strong feeling that there is a tunnel beneath Alabasta to Wano, and if you don't know why, I highly recommend you check out my videos on Pluton. But to give a quick summary, we know that a giant mole dug from a random water spring island went under the sea and went all the way to Alabasta, and tourists now use that tunnel for easier travel. I think something happened on a grander scale in the past with Pluton, and that is how it ended up so far down beneath Wano, and why Alabasta has the Poneglyph for Pluton in the first place. This could also explain why Alabasta is a desert, because this massive tunnel drained all of the fresh water from the island. I mean, Alubarna stands way above the rest of Alabasta for some reason, almost as if they used to have tall water surrounding it. So now that that summary's over, if that tunnel exists, I think that this could tie into Blackbeard perfectly. After he finds the Poneglyph, and if he can somehow find that tunnel, he could take it to A, have a much quicker route to Wano since he is dipping all the way under the ocean, and B, sneak in and get access to Pluton without anyone in Wano even knowing, until he releases it at least. And obviously this would give Blackbeard access to an ancient weapon. one that Luffy just churned down and he said he doesn't want, and that would just be an exciting storyline and make Blackbeard a real threat, as if he wasn't one already. And as for how they find the tunnel, I think Van Augur could use his observation haki in a similar way to Usopp so that he can see very far distances and even through walls to find the tunnel. And once they're down there, I wonder if he can use the scope on his eye and his observation haki together to see all the way through the tunnel and see how far it is, and maybe even what Pluton looks like before they take off. I know that's a little tinfoily for sure, but I just love that idea, and shout out to for bringing it up. It's kind of like how swordsmen can use armament or conqueror's haki on their blades to strengthen them. Maybe snipers can use observation haki on their goggles to see way further through more material, or maybe even predict where the shot will land because of the wind so that they never miss. This could also be kind of like an application of future sight, because the sniper is going to be able to predict where the shot would land before he shoots so that he just never misses. And please make sure that you don't miss the like and subscribe buttons, because that's it for this video, but maybe you'll want to check out one of these two videos that you should probably already see on the screen. Later.